Birk graduated at Otis Parsons Art Institute. His works have often dealt with contemporary life, with an emphasis on social issues. He was a recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship in 1996, a Getty Fellowship, and the City of Los Angeles Fellowship. Sandow is represented by the Copley Del Rio Gallery in Seattle, Catherine Clark Gallery in San Francisco, and the PPOW Gallery in New York City. Welcome virtually in Naples, University of Naples, Federico II, Sandow. So about the book, you published the book in 2004. You are a visual artist, you are a painter, you are an illustrator, but in this work, in Dante's, in this Dante publication, you are also a translator of Dante, which I consider really interesting in the way you adapted the Dante's language into a more acceptable and comprehensible language in English. So, what can you say about that? What can you say about this way of translating? Which were your references?
I sort of stumbled on Dante. I went to college for art school. I didn't know Dante really, and I sort of stumbled on Dante accidentally in a bookstore and was really drawn in by the illustrations from Gustave Doré from the 1800s. And I bought the book just because I liked the pictures. And then gradually I was just looking at it and reading it, and I started thinking I could sort of do paintings based on the Doré images, but update them so they would be about life in Los Angeles. When I was thinking about doing that, I randomly got contacted by a printing press in San Francisco that asked if I wanted to do a printing project. So then I said, sure, how about doing these prints based on Dante's images? And they said, oh, that's a great idea. And then they said, well, we could do like a whole set of prints and put them in a little box, and that would be like a cool project. But then we started thinking, it doesn't make any sense to have a bunch of pictures without the poem. So then we started thinking, how can we use the poem in English? And at one point I went to have a meeting with a lawyer about getting copyright permission to use some famous English translation. And she was having all this trouble contacting the writers and everything. And finally she said, like a joke, she said, it would be so much easier if you just translated it yourself. That never occurred to me. And then that night I was actually like in a bar with my friend Marcus. We're old surfing friends, and he's a writer. He writes for surfing magazines and things. And he said, well, what are you doing and what project are you working on? I said, I'm supposed to do this Dante thing, and this lady said I should translate it, but I've never done it. And he said, I studied Dante when I was in college, and he says, we could do it, let's do it together. From the very beginning, I really wanted to make the project about our times and our lives and our cities. And so that was the intent from the beginning. And then as a new reader to Dante, and since I hadn't studied all the history of Florence and Siena and the Ghibellines and everything, what I really found most annoying about Dante as a reader was that I always had to stop, and then I'd have to go look at the footnotes and learn what a Ghibelline was, and then I'd have to start reading again, and then I'd have to stop, and this whole stopping and starting was really, annoying and not true to the beauty of the poem. Yeah. And so we wanted from the very beginning to make, well, first of all, we never thought anyone would even pay attention to what we were doing. So we weren't very nervous, because we said, oh, no one's going to see this anyway. But we wanted to make an English version for like beginners, so that inside the text it contained all the information. I did the drawings simultaneously, so we don't call our work a translation because I don't speak Italian. We didn't read it in Italian. We read it in English. So we went to the local library in the bookstore and got all the English translations we could find, 6 different ones. And he lives in San Francisco, so we were doing this in different places. And then I we would do alternating canto. So I would do canto 1, he would do canto 2. We'd do it all by ourselves. We'd read like some lines like in 6 different ways in English, and then just think, well, how could I say this in my own way, in my own my own contemporary slang way. And then so I'd do chapter 1, and then I'd email it to him, and he'd email me too, and then we'd edit, and we'd switch it back, and we'd edit, and we'd keep editing so that they just became like a mix of both of our voices.
I found this work you and Marcus made on Dante's text really, interesting also in a linguistic way. For example, in the use of similes. Maybe we can discuss some of them. For example, in the first canto, canto of Inferno, when Dante gets out from the dark wood, it looks back to the dark wood. It's like a shipwreck, It's like getting out from a shipwreck, and you transformed it in this way. It felt like it almost been pulled over for something in a car, but then the cop turned away. So you transformed it in a fear of the cops. The beginning of Inferno, lo giorno se ne andava e l'aere bruno toglieva gli animali che sono in terra dalle fatiche loro, becomes, in your translation, it in dark, right around the time of the day when time clocks are punched and beers are opened. So I think it's wonderful, because it's the representation of also of the working class society coming back to her houses or to the bar. And I also, in general, loved also your way of translating your style. It corresponds exactly to that of Dante: direct, nude, dirty. So during this translation, whom did you aim more at, and which were your public?
My public was myself, my imaginary self. People like me that were just sort of coming to Dante new, people that talked the way I talked and live where I live in the city, and I also, my real public, since I'm mostly a painter, was that I thought people in the art world would be the ones that come to see it. I didn't think it would really reach into the scholarly Dante world. Like you're talking about the similes, we just read something like Dante describing the fireflies over the field or something, and we would say like, what's a firefly? We don't have fireflies here, but that's not an image that we can really picture in our head. So then we would think, oh, it's kind of like broken glass sparkling on the pavement or something. So we try to put it into, like you said, that has the same feeling, but it's from our own times.
I found also that as Dante put in his word, a lot of characters, of his contemporary life also, you made the same thing. I mean, you put in your hell some of the living or not living characters of our history. For example, Hitler, Mussolini, Kissinger, Pinochet, Saddam Hussein, and also Reagan and Bush among the violent souls.
This project, we did it in 2006 maybe, and this was when George Bush was president and the war in Iraq was going on, and we hated George Bush. It was a way for us to take out our own anger at our leaders, just the way Dante did, I think.
As you said, the illustration came from a base, which is the Gustave Doré's engravings. You readapted it in something more familiar. You used 3 different urban settings for the 3 words. I mean, we can realize that the hell it's about Los Angeles, and maybe some neighborhood of Los Angeles also, and you use San Francisco, and it's really visible. It's really evident also San Francisco in Purgatorio, and some views and of the streets of New York for the paradise, which is why this choice.
I started the project just doing Inferno, and then I did it in my hometown here in Los Angeles, and then it became an art show here in Los Angeles, and then I have a gallery in San Francisco, so they said, why don't we do a show in San Francisco? So I did Purgatory, and that was a perfect fit because San Francisco is famous for having so many hills and steep streets. So it was great to use all the scenes of them walking up the mountain. And then I had a gallery show in New York, and so it made sense to use places in New York for the show that was in New York. But a lot of people say, oh, you think New York is paradise and Los Angeles is hell, but I think they're missing the point. Because if you look at the pictures of Inferno, it's like dirty, trashy streets. And then if you look at Paradise, it's still dirty, trashy streets. The idea that I wanted was that in the pictures don't really illustrate the poem. They sort of a comment on the poem. It's like the pictures are a different story going alongside the text. So it's almost like if you look at the pictures, you see Dante doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't go to hell. He doesn't go to heaven. He's just walking around the streets of our city, and he's sort of imagining, or like on a drug trip or something, and he's talking to like homeless people, and he's talking to policemen, he's talking to just normal people and having these philosophical conversations. And he's just all through the whole poem in the pictures, he's just in the same urban America. So it's sort of my way to say, I'm not Catholic. I don't believe that there's heaven or hell, but still, you can still imagine these and have these conversations in the streets of our normal life.
I was surprised by the thing that in your afterlife, there's no, it's really dense with human.
I imagined that it's all just being in the urban place that I live. But if you see, as you go up to heaven, it becomes more and more international. So, all the different religions from around the world. And then in this painting that you can't see, but there's all the buildings, and they're all different companies from Korea and Japan and China and Spain and things. So Paradise becomes more an international city, more of a city of the world.
It's also interesting, to know the origin of some choices, like Matilda and as a beautiful, strip bar girl, and also the three theological virtues as pole dancers.
Two things. First of all, I was working on the project of Purgatory, and it was going to be for a show in San Francisco. By coincidence, there's actually a bar in San Francisco that's called the Garden of Eden. So I thought, I'll put that in there because everyone in San Francisco will know it. And then when we had the art show, we had a party, and then we all went to that bar afterwards. So then I knew if I was going to do that for Eden, I had to think who the girls would be inside. But also, I think there's the moment in the poem when Dante does see the beautiful women in the Garden of Eden. There's a bit of eroticism there that...
About the supernatural beings, you don't use them at all. There's nothing about that in your afterlife. There's no devil, no angels. So why is that? Why is there no... and why you choose this instead more mechanical things?
The idea was that Dante isn't in hell or heaven in my images. He's just in our daily life, and he's having this imaginary hallucination, sort of. And so I wanted to choose real things to represent everything that he imagines is an angel or a devil or something. And real people, so they're actual things. So I would think and look around the city and what could be similar to the cross floating in the sky in heaven or something, and it became the part of the bridge that's shaped like a cross. Yeah. The part where in Paradise when he's floating in the heavens and he can see all the planets, and I thought, well, where could you do that in our city? And I thought if you went to the Science Museum, there's a room that has all the planets floating from the ceiling, and he could be in that room. So he's still in the real world, but he's seeing the things that are described in the poem.
I'm intrigued by how you showed also Virgil, as you, Dante, call him, suppose a homeless man, a little bit dandy also, wrapped in this American flag. Why this choice of put Virgil in an American flag.
I could imagine him as being like a homeless person that's like the philosopher of the streets or something. And I know in all the images of Doré that he's always wearing the toga or the robes that of his times. Then I thought, well, if you walked around our city, what could be a robe that you would find? And so in different pictures, he finds different things. So sometimes it's a flag, sometimes it's a sign from like a McDonald's that says free coffee or something, and he puts that on.
I really loved how you represented Beatrice, because it's not the Beatrice, the angel-like person we can see in the medieval illustration. You presented Beatrice in a very different way, a chubby girl, but beautiful also, really beautiful. So
I knew how I depicted Beatrice would be really important. I knew as I was working forward, because I knew the poem and I knew that the moment that she appears, it's going to be a big moment and it's going to be important. So I was thinking for many months, like, you know, what should she be? Because if I make her, you know, blonde hair, red hair, or from one country, a different country, it's really showing favorites or something. So then I was really worried about it and couldn't figure it out. And then I said, okay, wait, just stop. Imagine what's happening. It's the girl that you used to love in high school and you haven't seen her for 30 years. It's like when you go to your reunion of your school and there's that girl in your head that you can picture, oh, she was so beautiful, so beautiful. And then you get to the party and now she's older, she's gained a lot of weight, she's just never what you imagined in your youth. So I thought that's what she should be like. And then I wanted to make her look Italian, you know, with dark hair. And
before finishing, what about the movie you made from this illustration?
It's quite different, and it's really funny, and it's really much more political than the book project. But yeah, I finished this project. It took 3 years, and it was 3 art shows in 3 different places. And then, you know, I live in Los Angeles. I live near Hollywood, and a lot of my friends work in movies and things. And we were all just, I think, at a backyard party. And my friend who went to film school said, "Hey, we should make a movie." And I said, "Yeah, let's make a Dante movie." And then we were it seems that's a great idea, because I think there's only been one Dante movie, that one from like 1928 or something. And it's never been made into a movie. We said, this is perfect. And we talked to our other friends and they said, do you guys want to help us make a movie? And my other friend said, well, I'm only going to do it if we do it with puppets, because he's a puppeteer for a job. And then we didn't have any money. We started trying to get money together, and we wrote the script and built all the puppets. It took us about a year. My wife and I made all the puppets, and then we filmed it over 2 weeks in a studio. And when we filmed it, about 50 people worked on it. A lot of like art students, puppeteer students, and then the people that did the cameras and lights and stuff were like real Hollywood people. But we did it in the summer, which is like vacation time for the movie industry. So we got people to work on it. Most people worked for free. And it came out really good. And it went to film festivals all around the world for a couple of years. It was on TV here in the US for a year.
About halfway through the course of my pathetic life, I woke up and found myself in a stupor in some dark, unfamiliar place.